Hey there guys, and welcome back to the third part in my Doctor Who DVD collection series celebrating 1,000 subscribers. In this part we're going to be taking a look at the 1980s, which is going to be quite interesting because I think some people consider this to be the sort of weakest era of the show, but I could be completely wrong about that, but I'm not sure where I'd put it in terms of my ranking of the eras of the show, but without any further ado, let's begin with The Keeper of TRAKEN, which is signed by Sarah Sutton, who plays Nyssa, and this is a fantastic story, one that I would like to give another watch soon, because I seem to remember really loving this story. I just love the set design, the costumes, and the story of it, and it's acted really well, and it's just a really fantastic Doctor Who story. And then we have Legopolis, which is also signed by Sarah Sutton. In my opinion, I think this is a bit of an overrated one. I would like to check it out because I think I've only seen the story once and didn't really think much of it, but no, in my opinion, I didn't really rate the story as high as some people do, unfortunately. Then we have the Peter Davison era, which you kicking off with, it's a bit tight here, Castrovalva, which is signed by Jeanette Fielding, who plays Tegan. Yeah, this is a pretty good story, quite a decent opening for Peter Davison, but I can't really remember that much about it, but I do seem to remember enjoying it a bit. And then we have Fall to Doomsday, which I believe is the first story that Peter Davison recorded, and in my opinion this was a bit of a letdown. I wasn't sure what to expect really when going into the story, and I was really looking forward to it, but unfortunately I just found it to be really boring, and the main villain, I found him to be really forgettable. And then we have Kinder, which is a fantastic Fifth Doctor story, a really psychedelic story, and it's a great story for Tegan as well, and she gets pretty traumatised by the events in the story. Definitely check this out if you're a Fifth Doctor fan. And then we have The Visitation, which is also signed by Janet Fielding. A really good story. I'm a big fan of historical stories, and yeah, this is definitely one of my favourites. And while Peter Davison isn't really one of my favourite Doctors, I think he's still got a handful of some really good stories. And then we have Black Orchid, which is another story I really like. It's only 2 parts, so it's a nice short one. It really feels like something that the new series would do, and I really appreciate it for that, because it is a really good story in my opinion. Then we have Time Flight, which is considered to be one of the worst stories in the show's history, and to me that cover just looks really badly photoshopped for some reason, and Tegan and Nyssa just look possessed on that cover. But yeah, it's a really crap story with crap villain. Just everything about the story is pretty terrible, and I don't really have any intentions of watching it again, to be honest, because I think I've only seen it once. Then we have The Arc of Infinity, which is a fairly decent story. I think I've only watched this once as well, so I can't remember too much about it, but I seem to remember it being alright. Then we have Snake Dance, which I don't think I've seen yet. I can't remember if I've actually watched this one, so I can't really say anything on it at the moment, but I've heard it's fairly average. Then we have Mordred Undead, which is quite a good story. It features the Brigadier, and yeah, it's the first story of the Black Guardian trilogy, and yeah, I quite like this one. Then we have Terminus, which in my opinion is one of the worst stories in the show's history. I can't remember why I seem to think that, but I think when I did watch it when I got this, I just seem to remember really hating it and just think how awful this was. So maybe if I watch this again, I'll give you my full thoughts on why that is. And then we have Enlightenment, which I can't remember too much about. I think I remember it being not that good, but that's about as much as I remember it. And then we have The King's Demons, which in my opinion this is the definition of filler. It's the most forgettable Doctor Who story in the Peter Davison era, and probably in one of the show's history as well. It's really poorly directed, and just a lazy story really. It just sort of exists. And then we have The Five Doctors, if I can get it out, which is a fantastic story, a really good story to celebrate 25 years of the show. It's really fantastic and probably quite a good jumping on point for classic Doctor Who fans, and I think even new series fans will appreciate this. If you're not that into classic Who, I think you can still appreciate this because it's a really solid bit of entertainment. And then we have Warriors of the Deep, which is considered to be one of the worst stories in the show's history. I think I quite like this story. I know it's bad, and the Merca is pretty horrendous, but I do quite like the Silurian design, even if it is a little bit clunky. But yeah, it's a really bizarre story, this one, but definitely by no means a good story. Then we have The Awakening, which I actually seem to remember really enjoying this. Well, not really enjoying, but I seem to like this one a bit. I don't really know why, because there are some stories that I've got that I know some people don't like, but there are a few that I do like, which is quite interesting. So yeah, I don't mind The Awakening that much. And then we have Frontiers, which is a really, really good story. Really suits the Fifth Doctor so well in this dark and gritty environment. I think that's where the Fifth Doctor really shines, and I think these next few stories really show how well the Fifth Doctor can be. It's just a shame that they left it a little bit too late, unfortunately. Then we have Resurrection of the Daleks, which is a fantastic story. I think it's the story that has the most high, one of the highest death counts, I believe. But yeah, really a fantastic story, and one of my favourite Dalek stories for sure. Then we have Planet of Fire, which is signed by Mark Strickson, who plays Turlo, which is, I do quite like this story. I think that's one of the main reasons why I got it signed, because I do think it's a fairly decent story, and I don't really mind Chameleon that much, to be honest. Then we have The Caves of Androzani, which of course is an iconic story, and considered to be the best Doctor Who story of all time, or one of them at least. Definitely a very, very good story. It's a must for any collection, to be honest, because it's just such a fantastic story, and I think this is probably Peter Davison's favourite story. I'll be surprised if it isn't, but I got a feeling it might be. And then we have the special edition version of it there. Now moving on to the Colin Baker era with Attack of the Cybermen, which is, it's not a bad story. I think it's alright. It's a bit of fun. Then we have Vengeance of Varos, which is signed by Colin Baker, which is a very, very good story, an incredibly dark story, and it's probably my favourite of his. It's just such a fantastic story, and I highly recommend you go and watch it. Then we have The Two Doctors, which is also signed by Colin Baker. Probably my second favourite Colin Baker story. I just love the location filming in Spain. I think it's really well acted, and Patrick Troughton is great in it as well. It's a shame, he spends most of the time as an androgyne, but it's still a fantastic story, and I really love the Sontarans in it as well. Then we have The Trial of a Time Lord with The Mysterious Planet, which is a bit average in my opinion, nothing special. Mind Warp, which is probably my favourite part of The Trial of a Time Lord, because it's a really dark and a very interesting story. Then we've got Terror of the Vervoids, which is quite a nice little a fun runaround story. If you like runaround stories, then I think you'll probably enjoy this one. And we got The Ultimate Foe, which I can't remember too much about. I think I did like it when I first watched it, because I think I've only watched this once, so I'll probably will watch it with the season 23 box set at some point. Then we have the Sylvester McCoy years. Now, Sylvester McCoy is my second favourite Doctor, just after John Pertwee. So, kicking things off, we have Time in the Rani, which is definitely one of the worst stories ever. It's just such a silly and daft story, and it's so cringy at times. It's not very good in my opinion. I think season 24 is, it's one of the worst seasons, if not the worst. But unfortunately, it's just the way it is at the moment. And then we got Paradise Towers, which it is quite a dark story at heart, but I think the Kangs are somewhat irritating, but there are some really interesting ideas to it. So maybe I would like to watch it at some point while I give it another go. Then we have Delta and the Bannerman, which is a story I actually quite like, to be honest. I think it's quite decent. I think one of the characters in this was one of the options for the companion after Mel, but unfortunately that was never meant to be. No, I do quite enjoy this story. I'm not sure why, but like I said, it's one of those stories that I enjoy, but I don't know why I enjoy it. And then we have Dragonfire, which is probably the best story from the season, and it is quite a good season, although it has quite literally a cliffhanger with the Doctor literally hanging on a cliff. So it's, yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why people don't like it for that reason, but it's okay, it's not a bad story. And then we have probably the best section of the 7th Doctor era. Forget season 24, this is where it really kicks off. And then we have Remembrance of the Daleks, which is one of my favourite Doctor Who stories, and one of my, I don't know if it is my favourite Dalek story, but it's definitely a fantastic story, and I think it's a lot of people's favourites, and you can see why, to be honest, because it is just such a turning point for the 7th Doctor era, and this is where the Cartmel master plan begins, I think. So definitely a good jumping on point for classic Doctor Who. So we've got the Happiness Patrol, which is a story that is very dark and a very, very good story, I think. I think people generally seem to like this one, and I really enjoy it as well, and I really love that pink TARDIS as well. And I think B&M should definitely make a pink TARDIS at some point, whenever they can. And then we have Silver Nemesis, which is probably the worst Cyberman story from the classic series. I don't know if it's the worst of all time, because Nightmare and Silver is pretty shit as well. But yeah, this is definitely a disappointment for the Cybermen, and they're just really weak in this story, and it's just a bit crap, to be honest. Then we have one of my favourite Doctor Who stories with The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, definitely one that I'd suggest you check out. It's just such a fantastic story, and I really love everything about it. I can't really find any faults with it, to be honest, because it's nearly perfect. It's I quite like the title of it as well, and it just sums up Doctor Who, because it is the greatest show in the galaxy, and it is just a fantastic story as well. So definitely check out The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. Then we have season 26, which is one of my favourite Doctor Who seasons of all time, and starting off with Battlefield, which is probably the weakest story in the season. But it's okay. It's all right. I mean, it's not bad at all. It's just sort of there, really, and there are some pretty good moments in it. But overall, it's just nothing memorable, to be honest. Then we have Ghostlight, which is a very, very good story in my opinion, even if it is a little bit confusing. And as you can see, my copy is signed by Sophie Aldred and Sylvester McCoy. I got this one signed because I don't think many people, I think most people get Remembrance of the Daleks or The Curse of Fenric signed, so I decided to go and get Ghostlight signed because it is a story that I really like. I think it's got a very good production behind it, and yeah, it's just a really, really good story, even if it is a little bit weird and a bit confusing. But definitely check it out for the visuals of it, because it's really well made and a very clever, and if not a bit jarring at times. So yeah, that was Ghostlight. Then we have The Curse of Fenric, which is one of my favourite stories of all time. It's just probably the darkest Doctor Who story ever. It's just everything. This is like the 7th Doctor at his best. They just nail his character so well, and he's just a bit of a bastard in it, but he's still brilliant. And Fenric himself is a fantastic villain, and the Hemovals are great. It's got great atmosphere. It's just everything Doctor Who should be, in my opinion. It's such a good story. Definitely check it out if you're a 7th Doctor fan and you haven't seen this one. It's definitely one that you should watch, because it's just so good. Then we have Survival, which I remember not liking this story because I just mainly felt it was a bit overrated, just because it was the final Doctor Who story. But I have grown to appreciate it over the years. I've watched it a couple of times since then. And then when I got the season 26 box set, nearly dropped it for a second. I still enjoyed it, and yeah, it's a good story in my opinion. And I think the scene where the Doctor and the Master are about to crash into each other on the motorbikes, I think that should have been a cliffhanger, because I think that would have been a really great, awesome cliffhanger. But it's still a fantastic, well, I won't say fantastic, but I'd say it's a pretty good story overall. Then moving into the 90s, because I've only got about 3 DVDs from the 90s, because there's very limited material from there if you're including the BBV spin-offs, but yeah, very limited material from the 90s. But we have More Than 30 Years in the TARDIS, which is A good documentary, but is a little bit dated now. But no, it's still a bit of fun, and I think I've only watched this once because, yeah, it's all right, and it's just quite a fun documentary. And then we have another documentary, which is I Was a Doctor Who Monster. Now, if you're wondering where I got this, actually, well, a friend bought me this from the Galaxy 4 website. I don't know if they've still got this on there. But yeah, it's quite an interesting Doctor Who documentary about the actors who played all different kinds of monsters, from Daleks and Autons and Zygons and whatever. You know, it's quite an interesting documentary, that, and it's presented by Sylvester McCoy as well, so it's pretty cool. And then we have the TV movie, which I actually really like the TV movie. I know as a story it's nothing fantastic or anything, but as a bit of entertainment, I'd say it's really good. But I don't think that Sylvester McCoy's, like, his Doctor's exit or regeneration scene. Well, the regeneration scene is fantastic, but the way that the Seventh Doctor left the show was really sad if you think about it. You know, it's not the way you would want a Doctor to go out being shot down. But no, I think apart from that, it's a really solid bit of entertainment in my opinion. So there we go. Actually, I have to put that there because I can't seem to get it in the gap. So there we have it. There's the 1980s. Tell me what you think of the 1980s as an era. I think it's a pretty solid era overall. And yeah, so thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you soon.